get started. Okay, so just to introduce myself, so my name is Matthew Henderson. So I'm filling in for Jennifer for the rest of the semester. She's on her leave for July and August. So I'll be taking you through to the end of the course and then submitting your final marks to Seneca as well. Today's going to be a pretty light day. It's not a super long lesson as you have a airport field trip, I believe, planned for today that Jennifer orchestrated and arranged before she left. So we're going to be looking at kind of airport familiarization. So when you get to the airport, you kind of know what it is you're looking at and being able to reference that. So a bit of background for me. So again, my name is Matthew. I have a Seneca account. I just haven't gotten the login, so I can't actually access it to reset my password and get my emails and things like that. But if you need me, my email, it should be up on the screen. I believe Jennifer or Sean was going to post my information for you. Seneca Polytechnic.ca. But if you need to email me, you can send it to matthew.henderson1 at senecapolytechnic.ca. That will be my Seneca email address. I'm hoping by the end of today that I actually have access to it. But by next week, I definitely will have proper access to the course. Yeah. So, a bit about me. So my background is that I'm a teacher. I'm actually a high school teacher. So that's why I'm just kind of filling in for Jen for the summer while she's on leave. But I teach history and science at a high school. But before that, when I first graduated from university, before I got full-time teaching in in secondary school, I worked as a customer service agent for WestJet for a number of years. So I started working at Pearson in Terminal 3 for WestJet. I started as what's known as a guest service ambassador. So just kind of front lines out helping passengers find their tickets, find their gates, supporting the passengers in any way that was needed. Then I became a customer service agent, which was the kind of ticketing agent and the gate agent operating and arriving flights. And then when I got full time teaching and I left WestJet, I had just started to get into the kind of IROP side of it, so irregular operations and dealing with missed connections and reticketing passengers who came in on late flights and trying to find them alternate routes. This is the same time that WestJet first started flying to England from Toronto. So we had the old 767s that we got from Qantas that sat in the desert in Australia for a decade before WestJet bought them and repurposed them. Um, so as you can imagine, they had a lot of mechanical issues. And so every night we flew Toronto to London Gatwick every night at 9 p.m. And that was my usual shift, as I usually worked the evening, so 5 p.m. to 11 p.m., or as happened quite often, much later when an IROP would happen. But towards the end of me working at WestJet, I spent a lot of my time dealing with those London Gatwick flights because flights would be so delayed. And so I'm sure you're familiar, or if you're not yet, you will be before this course is done or before this your program is done. When you're flying to Europe from North America, especially Toronto, you leave like 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m., and you arrive in Europe at like 7 a.m., 8 p.m., 9 a.m. And you do that and you connect onto a lot of different connecting flights to then move on. So as you can imagine, a late flight leaving from Toronto, supposed to be arriving in London at first thing in the morning. A lot of people were transferring to other inter-European or heading off into Asia flights. So I had to reaccommodate a lot of people to be like, well, yeah, your flight from Toronto on WestJet is about 3 hours delayed. You've now missed your connecting flight. Let's see if I can find another way to get you to Zurich or to Copenhagen or wherever it was you were going. So that was my background in kind of flights, which makes me pretty qualified to talk about the kind of ground operations, especially with today's lesson, airport familiarization. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. Looking forward to getting to know you over the next few weeks as we finish out the course. And yeah, I guess we will jump into the lesson. So I'll apologize if it doesn't look like I'm actually looking at the camera. I've got dual screens. So I've got my laptop with the camera right here, but then I've got the slideshow and my notes up on the screen behind me. So I'll be looking above the camera past you. But yeah, if you have any questions, I'm definitely there's going to be points where I'm going to ask you specific questions. So just unmute and speak up, or you can kind of toss it in the chat for anyone to comment on. All right, so week 10, we're looking at airport familiarization and employee briefings. Let's see if I can work that. All right, so we're going to look at airports. Specifically, we're going to use Toronto's Pearson, so Terminal 1 and Terminal 3 as our model, but we can apply that to really any airport in the world. They're all going to be structured fairly similar with the idea of like specific gates for specific destinations, international transporter, domestic. So we're going to look at features and amenities of the airports. We're going to look at what is required for being a ground operations crew member, whether you are customer service or tarmac or baggage, whatever part on the ground you're doing. What a starter shift kind of looks like and the things you need to be kind of prepared for, what a briefing is going to look like, what the pre-shift briefing is going to include, and yeah, what you should be looking for, what you should be taking out of that briefing before your shift starts as well. So here we've got an overview of Pearson. So we've got Terminal 1 and Terminal 3. If you're not from the area, and well, none of you would have been born, I'm sure, but once upon a time, there was a Terminal 2, but it is now a parking structure. So it is where the Terminal 1 parking structure was, and they tore it down once Terminal 1 came into kind of operation in the 90s. Terminal 1 came into operation. So that's why we have that bizarre numbering of Terminal 1 and Terminal 3, because Terminal 2 no longer exists. And so you've got the overview. Each terminal has what's known as a pier. So that's kind of like the piers that are sticking out just as like on the dock. And then around each pier are our gates. And so you can see in the second image is an array of kind of all the aircrafts represent a specific gate. So yeah, so on the left, we just have a general overview of the parking and then the specific gate placements. And so you can see at Terminal 3, we have what's known as a satellite gate. And we'll talk about that as well. So looking at Terminal 1, the terminals are broken into kind of two segments. We got pre and post security. So if you do any kind of, if you take the course that has you do a placement, most often you're going to be working in the pre-security. There are sometimes opportunities where even the students on placement are able to get their security clearance to get a rake, which will allow them to bypass security or get advanced through security, so that you can also work in the secure area, which is the gate area. So here we've got an overview of the check-in area for Terminal 1. And so you can see where the passengers enter from the roadway through the gates, and you can see it kind of laid out. Now, the scale is very deceiving. Terminal 1, in comparison to Terminal 3, is quite large. So there are 13 designated check-in areas for Terminal 1. And you can see up on the left part of the screen there, you can see Section 1 and 2 highlighted. So that area represents anywhere between 25 and 30 kind of check-in counters per side. So area 1 and 2 could be upwards of 60 plus check-in desks. And then you've got 13 of those total, so spaced out over 5 kind of hallways of check-in counters. So a passenger arrives in the drop-off area. They can choose to park. We saw in the last photos the parking garages and take the bridges across, or what's known as the kiss and ride, drop off, say goodbye to your loved ones, and walk into the airport. Once you enter, this is a shared space. So every airline that operates out of Terminal 1 or Terminal 3 will be different, will have a designated check-in space. Now, Terminal 1 specifically, the host airline of Terminal 1 is, of course, Air Canada. And so they occupy the largest amount of check-in space. But depending on where you're going is going to dictate which counter you need to go and check in. So as soon as you walk in, you need to be familiar with where the different counters are. And so a lot of people will mistake, they'll be standing in front of the screens looking for their gate information, but this is check-in. And so it's telling you to go to check-in counter 36 for your flight to Punta Cana, go to check-in counter 79 for your flight to Vancouver. So depending on where you're going in the network is where you are going to go and check in. So once a passenger has been checked in, they will drop their luggage off in the same area. So these check-in counters all have dedicated baggage service lanes as well. And then you'll proceed through past the check-in counters to the secure checkpoints, so the security checkpoints for the departures. One thing in Canada we have is what is known as pre-clearance. I'm sure you're probably familiar with it if you've not covered it yet, but I'm just going to explain it just in case. So pre-clearance is where you clear US customs while still in Canada. So that from a customs perspective, the flight that you take departing Toronto going to Los Angeles, Las Vegas, New York, wherever, from their perspective becomes now a domestic flight. You've pre-cleared customs. When you arrive, you don't need to do anything special. This has a couple added benefits because US customs can be very strict. So they prefer to reject someone before they even leave their home country. So Canada, for instance, is like they're not going to accept you into New York. They'd rather reject you here in Toronto so they don't have to come to that expense of, well, jailing you, essentially, holding you, and then getting you on a plane to return you to Canada. So they just want to deny you right away. But they have their own designated check-in area. And so that is over towards kind of the right side in Terminal 1. And so any airline that operates a transborder, so a Canada-US cross-border flight, has a desk in that transborder check-in area. So even though Air Canada might occupy check-in areas 1, 2, 3, and 4, they will also have a check-in area in check-in 13 for transborder. Same thing, Delta. Well, Delta's Terminal 3, but who's United or any other airline that operates Toronto to a US base would have a dedicated counter. So that is our pre-security check-in area. There's just kind of a legend so you can see what facilities are available. So post-security, the area is divided into different sections. So Terminal 1 has a total of 58 different gates, and they're divided into sections D, E, and F. Section D is generally domestic. F is dedicated for those transborder flights, and because it's a pre-clearance area, they have their own kind of secure area to keep people from interacting. Because once you've cleared US customs, they don't want you to be able to pass something off, smuggle something in. So they have a secure transborder section. And then sections E74 to E77 are designated international departures only. So they're another kind of secure area. You have to show a boarding pass with an international kind of flight destination in order to access that area. And that's mostly because of duty free. So the shops in that area all consist of duty free. So it doesn't require them to like hold it and then deliver it to the airport independently. Terminal 3 will have a similar kind of secure transborder area, and we'll talk about that when we get to Terminal 3. So total of 58 gates with 3 different sections, D, E, and F. So D is mostly or D is all domestic. F is also could be anything, but there is a designated F section that is transborder, and then E serves international flights. And so while each airline has dedicated check-in counters that are theirs always, the gate usage is assigned based on airport needs. So yes, Air Canada is going to occupy the most of them. And when it comes to kind of domestic, they're going to take all the domestic gates. But the international gates, any airline could be at any gate at any time. It's all shared space. Terminal 3 is a little bit different there. So we can see same kind of idea coming in off the road. You've got the parking, then you've got the bridges across to enter. But where Terminal 1 has long kind of hallways almost of check-in counters, all of Terminal 3's check-in counters are in banks along that kind of outer wall, and you can kind of see them banked here. So check-in counters in Terminal 3 start at 155 and move to the 540. The transborder check-in areas, so same thing, they have a dedicated, anyone flying to the US has a dedicated transborder check-in section, and that's located on the left there. So kind of desks 150 to 170 are transborder check-ins. So in Terminal 3, WestJet is kind of the host airline. So it's the largest airline that kind of operates out of Terminal 3. And then all the other international airlines, Air Transat, Sunwing, and like not Lufthansa, KLM, Etihad, they all operate out of the kind of end of the terminal. So the 500, 400s, and 500 level check-in counters tends to be those airlines. So we can see each area, each airline again is assigned a specific check-in counter. And while any airline can be assigned any check-in counter, they do tend to be grouped together. So any transporter, as I said, is in the 150s, 170s. WestJet tends to be that 170s to like the 200 to 230 counter. So those kind of middle three banks of counters tend to be the WestJet ones. And then the different airlines move down depending on the frequency, how often, how many flights per day they have operating out of them. Is there anything you notice about the difference in how the checkout, the pre-security is laid out between Terminal 1 and Terminal 3? So what do we notice about the check-in areas and how they were designed? Does anyone know what kind of big difference? Let's go all the way back. So here we've got our Terminal 1. And so we've got like an example check-in highlighted in that blue box. And then we've got our Terminal 3. And our check-in counters are highlighted there in the green box. What's kind of the big difference between them? What do we notice about their check-in areas? So you can feel free, you can unmute and just chat, or you could add it into the chat box if you don't want to speak. You can type it out. Yeah, vertical versus horizontal. So it's just showing you the sheer number of check-in counters. So Terminal 1 is a much busier terminal. So we see the vertical, so each side is 20 to 30 individual kind of check-in stations, whereas in Terminal 3, each desk, so desk 185 represents two check-in stations. So it's much more congested in Terminal 3. So,
Professor Anderson, this is
yeah.
Nada. Well, I was just looking at it, like, and we did go for the field trip as
Oh,
well
you've already
last
been.
week. Yeah. I have like, in the past, like I have traveled quite a lot from Pearson Airport, but yeah, this is what I noticed that like Terminal 3 is an international, usually called an international, like terminal for the global flights, but I never understood like why they have like lesser counters. Whereas like it's pretty crowded. In my opinion, like Terminal 3 is pretty crowded when they have flights to Asia or South Asia or Middle
Yep.
East. And it's always crowded, like the lines or the queues are coming till the gates. So I never understood that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's I can tell you from working in Terminal 3, it's a nightmare sometimes. Um, it comes down to money and kind of airport politics. Like you think you'd be like, no, there's actual airport politics. Um, the cost of departures from Terminal 1 for the airline is much higher. So they're paying a higher per kind of person flight than Terminal 3 is. So Terminal 3 is the budget. And so when you look at the the airlines that operate out of Terminal 3, like WestJet, still bills itself as a budget airline. Air Transat, Sunwing, low cost carriers, they're the ones that operate out of Terminal 3. Whereas the flagship, like Air Canada, um, Lufthansa, so they're actually All Star Alliance, they bill themselves as high end first class experiences. And so they pay a higher price to operate out of Terminal 1 than they do out of Terminal 3. And this kind of ends up being the money goes into Terminal 1 and the leftovers kind of go into Terminal 3. When I worked at WestJet, they had only just begun the kind of refurbishment and retrofitting of Terminal 3. Um, in an effort to address some of those kind of congestion areas because the check-in counters they're awful. It's also having just one wall of check-in. Again, as you said, doesn't allow for a good flow. The vertical flow allows people to come in, continue through. It's uninterrupted access, like flowing straight through, just as like water flowing through a channel. You hit a wall and everything kind of bursts up and then boils over. That was Terminal 3 sometimes. So, keeping that in mind, what kind of challenges can an airport face with their check-in areas? So, we talked about the congestion, and that is probably the biggest one. What else might be a challenge with the different check-in areas? So, you can think back to, and it doesn't have to be Pearson specific. You can think any kind of experience traveling. Yeah, confusion between figuring out which check-in counter for which airline. So all the check-in counters are identical, and there's some digital signage, but when you're showing up, where do you go? And the biggest issue I had whenever I would work check-in at WestJet is we had people coming in, they would wait in line for 50 minutes, an hour, and then they would get up to the desk and be like, "Yep, I'm flying to Los Angeles." I was like, "Great." This unfortunately is domestic. So I'm only dealing with those in Canada. And so they've just waited in line for an hour at the wrong gate or at the wrong check-in counter, and they have to go to a completely different area to check in for a US flight. The number of times I also had people trying to check in for different airlines, even though I had a nice big teal WestJet sign, I'm wearing a WestJet uniform, everything's branded WestJet around me, and yet they're standing in the line trying to check in for KLM. So there's a lot of confusion in the airport for check-in counters. Um, any other kind of challenges that airlines and airports might face? So again, it doesn't have to be Pearson specific, but it could be something that you noticed in your own travels at other airports in Canada or around the world. Yes, very chaotic. And so the business and airports are a business. And that's what we have to remember as well. Um, Airlines rent space from the airport in order to operate their own business, just as Foot Locker or RW and Co are renting space in a mall. And so, just like a mall, an airport is something that is meant to kind of enhance the user experience. People want to be comfortable. Travel is stressful. There's always those memes you see on TikTok of like, yeah, I was sitting waiting for our flight to depart, but little do you know, we almost got divorced packing. Air travel is always, any travel is always chaotic and stressful. And so the airport should be designed in order to mitigate that. And yet, many of the times, it doesn't, all this kind of confusion. So it's the goal of the business of the airport to enhance that customer experience. Because if you're not happy traveling, you're most often going to avoid that. Has anyone Does anyone know anyone who purposely avoids traveling out of Pearson? They might choose like maybe they go down to the island airport instead, or like, well, no, I'm going to fly out of Hamilton or Kitchener Waterloo because it's less chaotic than Pearson. It happens all the time. Unfortunately, if you're wanting to go anywhere outside of Canada, you either need to go to Ottawa, Montreal, or Toronto is the main option. Pearson is the option. So we know that it's chaotic. We know that congestion is an issue, and there's a ton of confusion. So, what is it that the airports are doing? What are the airports putting in place? What kind of things did you see when you did your airport visit that the airport is doing to mitigate these challenges, to make that enhance that user experience, make the passengers happy and more comfortable and want to fly out of Pearson? Online check-ins, yep, huge move towards that. What else are they doing? So online check-ins really going to help with congestion because you just move straight in, walk straight through the security, and you're done. Any other ideas? You can still do online check-in for international flights, but most often you're going to have to see the gate agent to verify your passport. So that's quite often um, why gate agents arrive there like an hour before the flight starts, and they're paging people to be checking passports, checking passports. What else? What things did you see in the check-in area? So in the public, the public access areas that might have been placed there specifically to address kind of passenger comfort or again, like think about that enhancing the user experience. What is out in the check-in area other than like the check-in itself? So yeah, dedicated specific counters for airlines, properly visible for people to walk in. Yeah, so that's one way that they're looking to avoid that confusion. Terminal one specifically, there is a huge screen at the end of each of those kind of like um, the vertical check-in areas. There is a digital screen being like, "Hey, this airline, this check-in counter, go to check-in counter C26 to go to Vancouver." Yeah, Terminal 3 has those screens as well, directing you where to find your specific check-in counters. But when we're looking at kind of user experience, um, did anyone see much? And this is a good one to compare Terminal 1 and Terminal 3. Um, is there much kind of food or shopping in the pre-clear areas? There's some. I think Terminal 3 has a Wendy's and a Starbucks, and that's about it. Terminal One there's a Tim Hortons and there's a Booster Juice and a couple like luggage shops, but there's not too much in the pre-secure area. A couple things like, okay, yeah, grab a snack while mommy or daddy's checking in, go get a snack by for something while you wait. Or you're missing, oh, my bag just broke. Well, let's get another bag. So there's kind of those convenience outlets. We'll see more of them on the inside of security because there are more things that you can buy and bring on board. But going back to the specific counters for specific airlines, and this is where we get that like Air Canada is the like host airline, and they often get preferential treatment. Same thing with WestJet. But the airline will assign those counters as well based on kind of time of use. So, for instance, for me for WestJet, when I worked there, during the early morning rush, that's when the most we had the most staff on from 4 a.m. to 12, 4 a.m. to like 11 a.m. because that's where kind of the most flights were leaving. All of our international flights were departing in those first kind of 4 or 5 hours of the day. And check-in during that time, we would be operating 30 to 40 different check-in counters. But by 10 a.m., we hit a bit of a dearth. Our flight load dropped off drastically. And so we would be condensed down into only 10 check-in counters. So it's very
August was
dependent on,
August.
sorry, what was that? Oh, just had the microphone unmuted.
Sorry about for us. Hello,
That's all right.
Professor. How are
Welcome.
you? Sorry for that, for the
Not a
noise.
problem.
Yeah.
But yeah, so time of use is very important for check-in. So depending on how busy the flight load is, they will have more counters or they'll have less counters. And so this is particular for staffing as well, because we had a ton of staff from 4 a.m. to 10 a.m. And then we would only have like 10 staff from 11 a.m. to like 4 p.m. when then kind of the evening shift started. One of the things that airlines do to alleviate, and this was how I got my job, is that WestJet specifically initiated the guest service ambassador, which was like, I'm not a check-in agent, I'm not a baggage agent, I can't board the flights or anything like that, but I'm just there to help. And so to help with that self-serve check-in, standing there directing people like, oh, you're going to the US? No, no, do not wait in this line, go down there. Oh, you're flying with KLM, not with WestJet. KLM's counters are already down there. So I'd be familiar with the entire airport. One of my biggest jobs when I was a GSA, a guest service ambassador, was that in that busy kind of 4 a.m. like security crunch, like it could take people 3 hours to work their way through security. So I had a flight sheet of all of WestJet's flights, being like, all right, who's leaving on the 7 a.m. flight 626 to Calgary? And so people would raise their hand and I'd go look at them, and it was my job to pull them from security. And I had a dedicated kind of like emergency security line that I would pull them to. And so these were all things that WestJet was instituting to help alleviate that congestion and, again, build a better guest experience. The automated kiosks that you talked about, that self-serve check-in, you can now scan your boarding passes, print all your luggage tags, drop your bags off, and go straight through security without ever actually speaking to a, an agent. And in fact, the airlines prefer that because it saves them time and money on staffing. So we got our Terminal 3 post-security departure areas. So just as Terminal 1, Terminal 3 is divided into kind of 3 areas. We've got the A, the B, and the C gates. So the A gates are what are known as transborder. So this is the US flights. The thing with Terminal 3, though, is our gates change. So there are some gates that you can see on the map that are both yellow and blue. So yellow are the A gates, blue are the B gates. And so these are what we call flip gates, switch gates. Um, and they switch between being transborder and domestic, depending, they can change, open a door, close a door, and close off kind of that secure area. But the thing with Terminal 3 is that the outside numbering doesn't always match the inside numbering. So for instance, for a pilot, gates are labeled A1 to A6, and then B7 to B20. So that's for the pilot's outside. But inside, B7 is actually A7. So it's A7 to A20, not B7 to B20. But they can also swing back and forth. So it gets pretty confusing. So we have our two main piers. So we've got kind of the B pier and then the C pier. So C37 to C41, A7 to, well, B7 to B26. And then we have our little satellite, which is an underground tunnel out to the exterior where we have ground operations. So you can load from the tarmac. And then we also have other gates. So this is what's known as a satellite terminal. This can be accessed in, satellite terminals can appear in many different ways. So this one's accessed by tunnel that runs under the tarmac, but it could require you to board a shuttle bus and be driven. Literally, there at Pearson, there's what's known as the infield terminal. So you board a bus and you're driven across the runways, and then you have to offload at an infield terminal. So the A gates, so these yellow ones that you can see in the picture, are the A gates. These are the pre-clearance US flights. You can see at the terminal, at the satellite terminal, we've got B1, B1A, B, C, and D. These are ground loading terminals. So they walk out on the tarmac, but they're not specifically pre-clearance for security. But anyway, so yeah, the gate labeling can get pretty complicated. And so as a gate agent, you need to be familiar not only with what the inside gate labeling is, because you know if it's labeled A, it's a US flight, which means you have to go through do a different set of kind of checklists. But also if your paperwork might say that, okay, flight 727 is arriving at gate A26. It's like, okay, great, gate A26. Oh, there is no A26. It's actually B26, but for the pilots outside, it's labeled A26. There's a lot of that kind of confusion at Terminal 3. So Terminal 3 has 48 gates. So Terminal 3 is smaller than Terminal 1. Terminal 1 had 58 gates. And we also get that with like their check-in area is so much bigger than Terminal 3's is as well. And we have gates A, B, and C. So the A gates are the pre-cleared, pre-customs, trans-border US flights. And some of the A and B gates are what are known as swing gates and can operate either way. At the very end of the C pier are the C gates, so C37 to C, I guess C30 to C37, and these tend to be international flights. And once upon a time, there was a gate that you had to actually walk through, show your international border in order to gain access. But they kind of did away with that. So, what is important to the post-security passenger areas? What is it that people are looking for when they get through security? Once they get through security and you are now what is known as gate side. So what is it that you think people are looking for? So looking for their gate numbers. Yep. So as soon as you pass through security at almost any airport, you are going to see a huge screen that tells you, okay, here's your flight information. And no longer is it a check-in counter, but now you have a designated gate number. What else? Remember, airports are operating as this business. They want people to come back. So they are still looking to ensure that kind of positive passenger experience. So what is it that people are going to be looking for when they're looking for that positive passenger experience? So what enhances the experience gate side? Lounges, yes. Anyone who's had a 2-3 hour layover, I had a 18-hour layover in Doha. You're definitely looking for like a comfortable lounge, not just a chair, but actually like someplace to kind of rest. What else? What might you be looking for at the gate side once you've passed through security now? Food, 100%. Because you can bring solid foods through, but liquids, nope. Any water you had, you're immediately wanting to kind of fill up on that water, get a drink, get something to eat. Definitely. What else? What other might be kind of must-haves for passengers? What kind of service? Just kind of like guest service, access to like the airport staff or the airline staff, I should say. Yeah, you definitely want a dedicated, like if you have questions of your airline, because remember, gate side, all those gates change all the time. So there's not a dedicated, okay, WestJet always uses B26. Well, no, WestJet might use it, Air Transat might use it. So you can't be guaranteed to find your specific airline to be able to ask a question. So having a dedicated guest service area for your airline, gate side is very important. What about Wi-Fi? Especially if you're traveling internationally and you don't have an eSIM or an international phone, you want to get on the internet. So reliable Wi-Fi is very important. Bathrooms, free Wi-Fi is also very important. Yeah. Bottle refill stations, charging stations. These are all kind of new things. That was one thing that WestJet, or not WestJet, Terminal 3 was just starting when I left, was inputting, like installing different charging stations. So changing out the lounge seats to have in-seat power so that you can plug in and charge. there's also lots of different services. Like people have been flying. This is something I've noticed flying around the world, especially like any longer flight, is even if you've been sitting on a plane for 6 hours, even if you haven't done anything, you just feel dirty. So you're always looking for, as soon as you get off the flight, you're looking for some place to kind of like freshen up and get ready. Um, so I went to Africa years ago and we had a layover, like we had an 18-hour layover in Doha, Qatar, and it was so hot. And so we went, did a little city tour, came back, and it was so disgustingly hot. Like we were just sweaty and gross, and we still had another 8-hour flight ahead of us. So we immediately were like, okay, what can we do? And so the Air Doha had showers. You could go to basically a spa, and you could rent out a shower for half an hour. And so yeah, we went. We each had showers, all fresh and clean. They provided us with towels, soap, shampoo, everything. So we didn't have to bring wet towels with on us back on the plane or go into our toiletries or anything like that. So that's something. Massages, hair salons, nail care. These are all kind of services that a lot of airports offer. And more airports are offering quiet spaces, dedicated spaces to sleep, but also work. Um, More people since COVID work from home and being like, okay, I need just a dedicated space for an hour. Maybe you're traveling and you're like, oh, well, I got to log in for Mr. Henderson's class. So there we go. I need just a quiet place to focus and listen to a lecture for an hour. And so that's becoming more and more now as well. Terminal One has a good life, yeah, out in their check-in area. I guess it's more their arrivals area downstairs near baggage claim, domestic baggage claim. I did that a lot actually. I had a Good Life membership when I worked for WestJet, so I would finish my. I'm very much a night person, so I would finish my shift at like 11 p.m. and I would just take the train over to Terminal One, and then I would go to Good Life for an hour, and then I would head home. So things that airports can be do to improve the service. So we talked about the free Wi-Fi, the multi-faith rooms. Oh yeah, it was a good one. Having gyms, those in-person salons, things like that. Signage, ample staff, making sure that we're fully staffed in order to help the guests navigate to the gates, and just easily accessible information. Has anyone ever been in a large airport and had to get from one end to the other? It can be a nightmare. Even Terminal 3 is not a big um, airport, but if you have an arrival, and this was my problem as a gate agent, the person doing all the arrivals, and this is also WestJet's kind of scheduling problem. But I would be arriving people on the C pier. So at like C37, I might be arriving a flight from Barbados. And then I've got a 20-minute window in which to do that arrival. And then I'm supposed to be at B2A, which is at the satellite on the other side of the airport. Even me walking quickly, it was almost a 20-minute walk to get from the farthest point in the C pier to B2A. So it's like 20, 25-minute walk. And then sometimes I was hustling. And so imagine some of these tight connections people have. They got off a plane and they got 15 minutes to get from one spot to another. Yeah. So airports are, they try to condense them as much as possible. And it's why we see that kind of design, that spoke design of long piers with lots and lots and lots of planes kind of surrounding them, centered around a central hub to try and limit that distance that people have to walk and get across. And then that's not even including the fact that you have to change terminals, which is if anyone's flown out of LAX or Charles de Gaulle in Paris, that's a nightmare having to change terminals within that airport. It's a lot. Other things that airports are doing are adding entertainment options. The Las Vegas airport, for instance, has casinos like slot machines inside the airport itself. Like you could be sitting at the gate and still get your slots in. Singapore Shanghai Airport has a movie theater. It's just a free movie theater. It's always got movies playing. You can just go step in and yeah, sit and watch a movie for 2 hours on your layover. Oh, so one thing that Delta is now trialing is facial recognition. Um, there's no speaking in this video, but you can just kind of watch it. So it's your own personal flight status board. So you scan your face and it automatically attaches to your boarding pass, and then it will change the flight status board to your personal information, to your gate, your departure, your seat number. Does it have seat number? No. Flight, destination, departing at, time to the gate, and what gate to go to. What do folks think about that? Is this an invasion of privacy? Is this too much information? Because now anyone can see where you're going. Like, hello, Cora, you're going to, I can't read, Portland. You're flying to Portland on Delta Flight 1173, departing at gate A56 at 7:54 p.m. Interesting, but I was like, oh, everybody now knows what gate I'm flying to and what time and where I'm going. Why does anyone need to be looking at it? Why does it need to be you're scanning your face at an iPad, but then you got to look up at the ceiling for the big screen. So that's a lot. I think it's a cool option, but maybe it doesn't need to be like you scan your face on the iPad and then just put it on the iPad there. Why does it need to be up there? But anyway, they're trialing it. So I'm not sure how long it's going, but it's running out of the Detroit airport. So a lot of airports are really striving to, again, enhance that customer experience. And so Doha specifically is really trying to, they've got the World Cup happening. So I was in Doha in 2019 and the airport did not look like this in 2019. I was like, I'm watching this video. I was like, I do not remember any of this. There were a lot of like comfort areas. Like we had, it was really cool. They ran different tour operations out of the airport. Yeah, so the new airport is very cool. But yeah, so when we went there, we planned it in advance. We had an 18-hour layover, so we did like a 6-hour city tour, but it operated out of the airport itself. So that was kind of a cool guest experience. I was like, look, I've got 18 hours. There's not really much I want to do. So all right, yeah, let's go on a tour. And then when we came back, we took a shower and there was kind of lounges where we could sit. There was quiet rooms where we could nap. So what I want you to do is we're going to watch this video. Um, Unfortunately, I can't make it full screen. As soon as I make it full screen, it shuts off the recording and it, yeah, gets difficult. But yeah, so let's watch it. But what I want you to think about is trying to identify any kind of aspects of the Doha airport that you think were designed to improve the customer experience, the passenger experience. All right, let's figure out how to make that happen. So I'm guessing, well, there's no speaking over that last one, but okay. Speaker, yeah. This is where I'm more used to Google Meets, not Zoom. I got pretty good at this in COVID. Just been a couple of years since I've had to use Zoom. Oh, share computer sound. All right. Someone give me a yes or no if this sound travels through for you.
Hi everyone, it's Katie from Paradise Falls family. In this video, we'll be finishing our Thailand series with a quick overview of Doha Airport, or Hamad International Airport in Qatar. Our flights to Thailand included a stopover here, and it was such a wonderful airport, a level above the usual standard, so we thought we'd do a quick overview for anyone else transiting through Qatar. We don't often book flights that require a stopover. Travelling with kids and loads of luggage, it just feels like more hassle than it's worth. If we do need to change, we usually turn it into an overnight stay. However, for our flights from Manchester to Phuket, this required some form of change, so we opted to try a 3-hour stop each way in Doha. We were pleasantly surprised at just how well this worked, and it actually made the journey much better for us as a family. Hamad International Airport is the hub for Qatar Airways, regularly billed and voted as the best or one of the best airlines in the world. If you're flying from the UK or Western Europe over to Asia, Qatar Airways will be one of the main options, and your flight will then likely include a stopover in Doha, which for us was around halfway between Manchester and Phuket. We made sure to select our flight times carefully, setting off in the morning with around a 6 to 7 hour flight to Doha, a 3-hour stopover, and then another 6 to 7 hours on to our final destination. This worked brilliantly, with the 3 hours being perfect, giving us enough time to disembark, get something to eat, have a little look around, and then get on our next flight. It gave us more than enough time, and importantly for us, some buffer time in case of delays, and it worked really well. Taking off in the morning meant we could get some breakfast in the first airport, arrive at Doha in the afternoon, and get a proper meal for dinner in the airport. This was brilliant for us, as none of us are fans of airplane food. It also gave us the chance to stretch our legs and turned a grueling 12-hour flight into 2 much less daunting 6-hour flights. In terms of the logistics of this, on the way out we disembarked straight into the departures lounge and were then free to explore until our next flight. On the way back we did have to go through security again, which was frustrating to have to give up all of our drinks, but it didn't take long and we were back in the departures area again quickly.
All right, I'm just going to pause it because it's an 8-minute film, but we're seeing a lot of that. So cleanliness, shopping options, yes. What was the ambiance? Yes. The indoor-outdoor area, yeah. So as I said, 2019, the airport did not look like this, but what they're trying to do and what other airports, so I never say this right, Changi Airport, the Singapore airport, SIN. They were kind of leaders in this, that the airport itself becomes a tourist destination. There's a lot of airports now trying to do that. And we can see a big difference in the architecture of Terminal 1 versus Terminal 3. Terminal 1, like it was built as a architectural piece. The terminal itself was meant to be pleasing to look at and airy and glass and all those things, where Terminal 3 is concrete and bricks. But more and more, we're seeing this kind of destination tourism that the airport itself is a draw for tourism. The biggest one of that is so Singapore. So this is a huge airport for, if you think about it, Singapore is kind of a city state. Um, it's the city itself and like 100 miles about. It's a small country, but an absolutely massive airport. Um, and so, oh God, 2016 is when I went to Indonesia and we had a stopover in Singapore. And this airport was absolutely insane. Like it was so cool. So much stuff. Like rooftop pool. We only had a 4 hour layover, unfortunately. So like it wasn't even enough time. Like, and I've joked about it. It's like, oh, I want to go back to Singapore so I can see more of the airport. Like I want to have a 24-hour layover in the Singapore airport because there's movie theaters, pools, outdoor gardens, rooftop terraces that you can go out and get some sun, which the flight we did. So I did Toronto to San Francisco. The flight San Francisco to Singapore was in 16 and a half hour flight. It's the third longest flight in the world. And I'm notorious. I cannot sleep on planes. It's that like I can sleep almost anywhere, but I need to have at least some kind of like I need to be laying down in some form. Not fully, but airplanes, I can't sleep. So 18 hours wide awake. My husband, 18 hours of sleep. I was like, oh God. But when we got to Singapore, it was really cool. Like the airport was beautiful. So again, this one's a yeah, people do prefer to lay over in Singapore just for the airport. This is another like 8 minute video. You can watch it fully at your own time. I'm realizing, I've already been talking for an hour.
This is the best airport in the world. Now, I've flown all over the globe, and I usually want to get out of the airport as quickly as possible. So to test the title, I spent a day at Singapore's Changi Airport, which was just crowned the world's best for the 12th time.
And we do not even have a flight. You want to land on me?
I toured the gardens, the $1.3 billion lifestyle hub, and the rooftop pool. If airports are filled with people trying to go somewhere else, why did this tiny island nation spend so much money to build this place? And what's it really like to spend a layover here?
Woo.
A lot of the good stuff at Changi is airside, meaning you need to book a flight to see it. But the jewel is landside, so you can visit the giant donut-shaped shopping mall without having a plane ticket, and there are no gates here. It sits between the control tower and Terminal 1. It took 4 years to build and was funded with private investments. If you're airside, the train between Terminal 2 and 3 cuts right through the dome.
After, 3 reports on this one terminal in my lifetime as a reporter, finally get to see it. So it's this side, no? Here goes! It's like the best roller coaster I've ever been on. That doesn't even look real. It looks like all the pictures. Wow.
But if you're landside and you don't have a plane ticket, you can still visit the Jewel. You can enter through a footbridge from Terminal 3 ticketing. There are 10 floors to Jewel, 5 below ground and 5 above. In the middle sits the Rain Vortex. At 130 feet tall,
It's the tallest indoor waterfall in the world.
it runs 24/7, using mostly recycled rainwater. At night, the waterfall is a canvas for a 360-degree light show. The city of Singapore is known for its gardens, so the airport captured that theme inside Jewel with this tiered vegetation, and 99% of these plants are real.
You would never believe that planes are taking off on the other side of this.
Canopy Park sits at the top of the dome and costs about $6.
What?
The mirror and hedge mazes cost a bit extra.
You can change the gate to block off other people when they come around next time. I feel like I'm in Harry Potter right now. Oh my God, I made it. I got so lost.
These skynets tower overhead, and you can pay an extra $13 to bounce on them.
Oh my God, the elephant's my favorite. He's so cute. I'm not on fire. These are the foggy bulls, and apparently they're a hit among the little kids, which I am one of those, so a hit among me as well.
But my favorite part, this glass bottom bridge that hangs 75 feet above the ground. We got media passes for the day to tour everything airside, starting with the hotel right by the gates. A third of passengers transit through Changi.
So they don't leave the airport, which means that amenities here airside and hotels like the Transit Hotel are really important to keep people here. So this room is right on the transit side. So your view is overlooking the tarmac. Flights taking off.
Rooms this size cost about $330 a night. But even if you're not staying in the hotel, the 24-hour gym and the pool are open to the public.
So we're just gonna wait for the SkyTrain.
All right, we'll stop there. But yeah, so Singapore, they built this flagship airport, and the airport itself is a tourist draw that pulls people into their country. But it serves a dual purpose. There's that huge, as someone said, yeah, the fully functional mall. So it serves as a fully functional mall accessible to the citizens of Singapore as well as those transitioning through. Very much like Iceland bills itself as a fly Canada, layover in Iceland, continue on to Europe, have that little 24-hour vacation. Singapore acts as that same kind of layover hub. They build themselves as a stopover between Europe and Asia, being like, yeah, layover in Singapore, spend 24 hours, see the city, check out the airport, and then continue on to your flight to Asia. So yeah, you can, yeah, so as I said in the video, it was ranked the world's best airport over 12 times. So this was the video from the 2022. But yeah, it's a very, very cool airport. It was really cool to kind of explore and see, but rooftop patios, and they have a sunflower garden, which was really cool. And just, yeah, multiple movie theaters. And it's not even just like, oh, it's one or two, but it's also a very big airport. So the downside of that is that if you have to change terminals, it takes a long time. So Singapore Airport is not a 10-minute connection airport. It's like you need an hour to get from one gate to another sometimes.
This is the best.
Here we go. Okay, back to Pearson. So we can see kind of our layout of gates. And so these are numbered for the outside from the oh no, they are inside numbers. So these are the numbers that the guests would see. And so you can see those swing gates. From B14 to B20, they can either be, there's a dividing wall that can be opened or closed to make it either trans-border or domestic or international as it's needed. So there's a total of 106 different gates for Terminal 1 and Terminal 3. So it's 106 aircraft that can be parked at one time between the two terminals. So now that we're kind of familiar with the environment that we're working in, we're going to look at it from the employee perspective. And so no matter who you work for, or no matter like what job you do, early is on time is late, and late is absolutely unacceptable, especially when it comes time for airlines. Whether you want to be, again, like I did, customer service, or if you want to be a flight attendant, like Miss Patrick is, like Jen Patrick, was a flight attendant for years. Whatever part you want to do, pilot, whatever role you want to do in the airline, early is the standard. You need to be there ahead. So 5 reasons why you should arrive early. So less stress. You got to take time. So for me, when I was working for WestJet, I was still working part-time as a teacher. I was working as a supply teacher, a substitute teacher. So I often would teach at a school. So I'd be in my, well, not so much this, but my teaching get up. And I would leave the school and I would drive to the airport, and I would have my uniform waiting in the car with me. So it was always really stressful because I was like, what if there's traffic? I can't leave the school before 3:30, 4 o'clock at the earliest, and I start work at 5. So depending what school I'm at, that could have been pretty dicey for me. So making sure that you're early really relieves that stress, especially if you take public transit. You're not rushing through, you're presentable, you have time to catch up. Because when it comes to an airline, the start of shift, you need to be ready. You need to know what is happening that day. You need to be there and briefed And so depending on your start time, so again, for me at WestJet, if I had the 4 a.m. start, we had a designated 4 a.m. start of briefing meeting. If I had a 5 p.m. start, we had a designated 5 p.m. start of day meeting. But if I started at 11 or 2 or 3, I just had to catch up on the fly. I had to brief myself, or I had to go out and make sure I saw it out with my supervisors or the leads and be like, okay, what's the deal today? What's up? What's down? What's not working? Arriving early, make sure you're always having enough travel time, and that builds in that buffer. It's like, what if the TTC is slow, or you get to Kipling Station and you miss the airport shuttle, and the next one's not for 15 minutes. Like if you haven't built in that wiggle room, that buffer time, you're now late for your shift, and gives you that time to deal with what's unexpected. When you arrive early, you have time to adapt to what is unforeseen, what is unplanned. You forget something that's like, oh, you get there, you're just dragging your feet. It's been a long day. You need that coffee. Well, you got time now before your shift starts. Go grab the coffee, get that quick caffeine burst, and get ready to go. So when you're preparing for shift, whether you are customer service, whether you are a flight attendant, whether you are ground ops, you need to make sure that you are fully ready and to go. And that includes proper grooming. Airlines built themselves on the idea of the perfect face. Um, there's a lot of sexist undertones when it comes to kind of their grooming requirements, but it is that we're putting on a pleasant face, we're putting on a pleasant appearance. And so that can include anything from including your teeth to body odor, things like that. But on the other side, it could also be if you're overpowering with your perfume or your cologne, that can also be a detractor for um, your job. So a lot of jobs, especially now, um, they're now scent-free environments. You're not allowed to wear scented perfumes or deodorants or things like that because it can be a turnoff for that guest experience. So make sure whatever company you work for, each has their own standards. WestJet versus Air Canada versus Transat versus Sunwing, KLM, any of them. They all have their different standards as to what is and is not allowed. Some airlines will allow tattoos, others you're not allowed to have any visible tattoos. Or some airlines have even strictures on what piercings you're allowed. You're allowed a single lobe piercing. Women could have piercings, but men cannot. If you have a nose piercing or a tongue piercing, you may be required to take that out. When I first started working for WestJet, I actually had an eyebrow piercing. Um, and at the time, I had to take it out. I was not allowed to have any facial piercings. Um, what was the rules? So there was a limit to number of ear piercings you could have. You could have a single nose, small ring or stud, but lip rings, chin, eyebrow, none of those piercings were allowed. So I had to take my eyebrow piercing out. And early on in my shift, there was like a big eye drop. I ended up having a 12-hour shift. And at that point, my piercing had healed over, so I couldn't put it back in. But so you need to know whatever grooming standards there are, you must meet them because you could lose your job if you don't meet those standards. And part of that also includes like if you want that morning coffee, that morning breakfast, donut, whatever it is, that all happens before you start your shift. Because when you start your shift, especially as a gate agent, ticketing agent, you start at 6 a.m. You need to be at your counter or at the gate at 6 a.m. There was plenty of times that I showed up to work and I would be scheduled like, oh, yep, here's your first gate assignment. Your shift, my shift starts at 1600, but the flight is supposed to arrive at 1605. So it's like I got 5 minutes to get to my gate and make sure I'm prepped and stuff. And so I don't have time to then go and get a coffee and get myself ready. So make sure everything's done before you arrive. Because also most often, oh yeah, personal items are properly stowed and secured. When you start your shift, you must start with certain requirements. So get signed in, get checked in, because if you're not checked in, you're not getting paid. And make sure that you've checked any updated communication bulletins. So these are known, I'm sure you've talked about them already, read and signs. You have to read and then sign acknowledgement. So most of these are digital, they come in through your employee email. And then you're going to attend your morning briefing. And the briefings are very, very important. So sign in can be any number of ways. Most are fingerprint or you're swiping a badge. As a student on placement, you might have like an actual signature sign in. You sign in on paper, and that's how they might record your hours. Again, different companies are going to use different methods. So you're signed in. You then check what are the new updates. So for me, I would show up at the airport, I would swipe in, and I would log into the computer because that would also give me my any updated reading signs. Um, the good thing about most digital communications now is you could do your reading signs in advance before you even arrive at the airport. But that is also where I got my shift assignments. So I knew that, okay, here's my layout, here's my schedule. I need to be at this gate at this time, arrive this flight, and here's all the specifications I have. And then you have your morning briefing. So these are the briefings that prepare the customer service agents for their day. So you're going to be looking at what are the total loads for today? How many passengers are we going to have? Are there any specific areas, flights that are overbooked or canceled? What are the projected problems for that day and how can we meet them? It can also be things like what weather is happening. Are there any mechanical issues, not just with the airline itself, but what might be affecting the airport? So what gates might be closed or inoperative? Which escalators are out today at Pearson? Because there's always one. I've never had a shift at Pearson. I've never even been to Pearson where there wasn't at least one escalator that I needed to take that was at a standstill. And you're looking for any other information that might be relevant to your role. Maybe like, okay, you are doing gate arrivals, you are working in the US transborder, you are doing check-in, you are doing passenger assistance. And so what specific place you are taking. And of course, what issues are happening in the airport. There are briefings sometimes when other airlines might be having strikes, like their baggage handlers might be on strike, or they might be having delayed operations that could then impact us or the airport itself. Well, baggage carousel 12 is down, so we're going to be rerouting all luggage to baggage carousel 10. So all these things we need to be aware of, and you get all this information in that pre-shift briefing. Or if you had a start time, this is one of those kind of start of day communications that you need to be checking for. And then, of course, any reading signs, new procedures, new bulletins that you need to make sure you're kept up with. And it gives you the chance to ask any questions of your supervisor. What do I need to be aware of? What am I missing? Or what was the follow-up to this question from yesterday or anything like that? So briefing tools can look a bunch of different ways. So here are two different ones. So you have a standard briefing sheet that might be very flight specific, telling you the exact number of passengers, what special requests are there, who requires a wheelchair for assistance, who requires or has a pet in the cabin, or emotional support animal, things like that. And then you have kind of your daily flight information sheet. So for me at WestJet, again, I had that 4 a.m. start. We would get a printout of these sheets. And it would have every flight of WestJet for the next 6 hours, what gates they were flying out of, how many passengers, where they were going, and their departure times. And so this is what I would have when I was walking up and down the security line, being like, all right, who's flying to London Gatwick at 10 a.m.? Okay, yep, it's 9:10 right now. Let's pull you through security so you can get on that plane. A problem with this, though, is that it's paper. It doesn't update. Gate changes are a reality that aircraft might be a little delayed. Like if flight 726 is delayed leaving B26 and flight 829 is supposed to be arriving at B26 5 minutes later, well, that gate's now got to change because this flight isn't leaving. And so your paper copy isn't going to update. So make sure wherever you've got your paper copy, but always, always, always make sure that you can access a digital up-to-date tracker for cancellations, delays, gate changes, especially. Because if your job is to help direct people to what gate to be attending for your flight, you need to know that, okay, well, yep, let's see. LAS leaving at 1:45 p.m. to Las Vegas is no longer at gate A11. It's now been changed to gate A7. And so you need to be able to be aware of that and change. You also need to be aware of where someone needs to go. So, for instance, again, that LAS flight, you want to make sure that they're not in the B pier because that's a transborder, that's a US flight. They need to be going through US customs to know where you are. On these DFI sheets, you also get the special information column. So for instance, you've got all your kind of short form codes for different passengers. So from arriving from London Gatwick at 10 a.m., there's 321 passengers. 5 of them have requested wheelchair assistance. Coming from HOG, what is that? Hoging, we have 167 passengers plus 4, so 4 crew. And there are 2 pets in cabins coming off the aircraft. So all those kind of things that you need to be aware of. Different airlines are going to present this in different ways. So this is just kind of a general overview, but every airline is going to have a flight specific briefing sheet and a daily kind of overview sheet. And you're going to want to know what they are. And maybe they're just all digital now. But you want to make sure that you have access to that and you're constantly monitoring and updating for gate changes, late arrivals, or cancellations. All right, so preparation is the utmost importance. Be prepared. Remember that being early is being on time. If you're just arriving on time, you're already late for work. Prepare for your shift, arrive early, and use that time to get updated on any new publications, review the requirements for the operations of the day, check in with your superiors to make sure that, yes, this is what we're doing, this is what's going on. Participate in the briefing, ask questions, confirm your requirements. Make sure if you're going transborder that you have the transporter gate pack, that you have your safety vest or whatever requirements are needed for you to fulfill your job for that day. And yeah, show you're prepared and ready for your assigned shift and all associated responsibilities. Be open and be willing to ask questions. It's never a bad thing to ask questions. It shows that you're engaged and it also shows that you're interested. And so for me, like I started as a guest service ambassador. I was that for 3 months and then I became a CSA. And then I did CSA for a year and then I got trained on rebookings and booking on different airlines. And then I started to move towards a supervisor position, but I was teaching more. But I started looking, I was like, hey, what does the IROP coordinator do? What does the AOC coordinator do? How would I look at that? And I was able to job shadow those different jobs to like help me with my own kind of career growth. I know a lot of people that really wanted to be flight attendants, but didn't get hired in for flight attendant and started as customer service agents, but then were able to do a shadow pairing. Like, oh yeah, I'm an internal hire. I've been a CSA with WestJet for 2 years. I'd like to I'd like to know what it's like being a flight attendant. And they actually scheduled them for a pairing. So they went on, they were a guest, they had a boarding pass and things like that. But they would shadow a flight crew for 2 or 3 days and see what an actual pairing was like. So there's lots of kind of opportunities, and you will only get those opportunities if you ask about them. But you need to show that you are deserving of those opportunities as well. So make sure that you are prepared and ready and do a good job, and you'll have a good reputation, and that will help you move pretty far in any company that you work for, airline, ground operations, in the air, whichever path you want to take. Okay, that's the end of our lesson. That was supposed to be a short one, but I rambled a lot. So I'll work on that for next week. But yeah, if you have any questions, I should have access to my email any day now. Feel free to email me. I will post this recording on the classroom. If I can't post it today, I'll have Sean Price post it on my behalf. And he was the one who posted the link for you today. But yeah, everything should be up and running. If you have any questions, stick around and ask. Otherwise, thanks so much for coming to my first class, and I'll see you all next week.